Morning, children. This lesson is for class 6 for the subject of physics, chapter number 3 from your textbook Concise Physics, Selena Publications. Today, we are going to discuss the force of friction and its effects. It is being submitted to you on 19th of July 2021. Children, you already know that force of friction is a contact force. It is the force that opposes the relative motion between the two surfaces in contact with each other. It means it always acts in the direction opposite to the direction of motion. For example, if you want to push a box on a floor by applying a little effort, the box does not move. This shows that there is some opposing force between the box and the floor which opposes the impending motion of the box on the floor. This opposing force is the force of friction. However, when you push the box hard by applying more effort, the box may start moving. It will happen when force applied by you overcomes the opposing force of friction. Now let us discuss the properties of friction. Frictional force is produced only when one object actually moves or tends to move over the surface of another object. It acts in a direction opposite to that of motion. The amount of frictional force depends on the roughness of the two surfaces. If the two surfaces are rough, then frictional force is more. And if the two surfaces are smooth, then frictional force is less. Also, the amount of friction depends on the mass of the object moving over the surface. Higher the mass of the object, greater is the magnitude of frictional force. Means greater frictional force is opposing the motion of an object over the surface. The amount of friction varies from surface to surface. If the ball is allowed to roll on a wooden surface, its motion is stopped within a very short distance. The same ball continues to roll over a long distance on a hard cemented floor and more a much longer on a glass surface. The reason being the smoothness of the surface. Smoother the surface, less will be the frictional force applied onto that object. Then, the nature of medium in which the body moves exert the force of friction differently. For example, the force of friction between a solid and another solid is more. It is less between a solid and a liquid, and still less between a solid and a gas. Now, the force of friction arises because of the interlocking of the irregular projections on the two surfaces in contact. It means that if the push is more than the weight of an object, the friction will be less. Whereas if weight of an object is more, then the force to apply on it, then more friction will oppose its motion. Second thing, remember that friction acts in the direction opposite to motion. Now the next topic is effects of friction. Friction opposes motion. As discussed earlier also, a ball rolling on a plane surface slows down after a while and ultimately stops. It is due to the surface which exerts frictional force on the ball. Friction produces heat. The tires of the vehicles after a long drive becomes hot due to friction. Moving parts of a machine becomes hot when machine is run for some time. Then friction causes wear and tear. Soles of your shoes are worn out after use. Your pencil lead gets blunt. Tires of vehicles are worn out. After continuous use, even parts of machines are damaged because of friction. Let us now take a short break and recapitulate the topic discussed above by answering the following questions. 1. What is friction? 2. Give 3 effects of force. 3. In which direction does frictional force act? The answers are: friction is the force that opposes the relative motion between the two surfaces in contact with each other. Effects of force of friction are: friction opposes motion. 2. It produces heat. 3. It causes wear and tear. Answer 3. The frictional force acts in a direction opposite to that of motion. Now let us continue further and discuss 3 kinds of friction. Friction is of 3 kinds: static friction, sliding friction, and rolling friction. Static friction. To slide an object on a surface, we apply a force as pushed. If the force applied is less, the object does not move due to the force of friction on the object by the surface opposing the motion. When the force of friction becomes equal to the applied force, the net force on the object is zero. So the object is still stationary, but is just about to slide over the surface. At this stage, the force of friction acting on the object is called the static friction. The maximum opposing force between the object and the surface in contact with it is called the static friction. Then comes the sliding friction. When the body begins to slide on a surface, the force exerted by the surface on the object is called the sliding friction. It is equal to the force required to keep the object in motion over the surface. Sliding friction is less than the static friction. When we are walking or running on the ground, the force of sliding friction acts on us. We have to exert a force to overcome the sliding friction so as to continue walking or running. If we stop exerting the force, our motion comes to a halt due to sliding friction. Next is rolling friction. When an object rolls over a surface, the force which opposes the rolling motion of the object is called rolling friction. It is less than the sliding friction on the body of same mass. That is why to move heavy objects on the ground, rollers are used. With this topic, I'm ending up today's lesson. Kindly read the topic covered from your textbook also. Thank you, children.